what are your thoughts on pursuing an international MBA versus going for an Indian MBA? Like, let's say, why did you choose Stanford or like all these international universities and not, let's say, an IIM Ahmedabad or the top universities? What were the factors you considered there?
Again, just an N of one experience of my own. But in my case, my motivation, honestly, to do an MBA was the fact that I'd been in. This is not again atypical, but I'd been in Bombay my whole life before that, and I knew that my reason to do an MBA was I knew I wanted to get out of Bombay, and out of the country.
Why? Why?
I mean, because here's the thing, right? Your learning journey, again, not your, but my learning journey started plateauing at one point in time, which is that whatever the city had to offer, I at least from my, they say that you're the average of the 5 people you spend most time with, and so that started I started feeling like this pond is not big enough, even though it's Bombay, but. And again, I don't mean to sound sort of horrible about that, but I wanted a complete transformation of the pond I'm in, and a radically changed pond in that sense. And so for me, my biggest motivation was that I wanted to go out of the country and truly sort of feel like a small fish in a big pond once again, and be around a whole set of stakeholders and individuals that I haven't normally got a chance to interact with, which to be fair, I don't know if ISB or IIMs would have solved the same sort of problem. It's not like I wasn't surrounded by incredible sort of at least from a startup background, so an incredible sort of venture VC individuals at VC firms, high performing individuals at VC firms and IB firms, and so on and so forth, which is usually the ecosystem that founders are surrounded by, if not your own sort of the industry that you're surrounded by or you're working in. But I don't know whether IIM or ISB would have given me any different than that anyway, and I wanted to sort of go change that up. And so my biggest motivation was that I needed to be out of the country to get a lot more international and exposure of a diverse cohort. That everything said and done, regardless of incredible education, I don't know whether the Indian schools have a good international mix of a cohort. And so my motivation was just that.
Yeah, I think, I've not heard any Indian B school having like students from outside India, like at least the way other B schools outside India have. So even, I also usually sometimes think that why are Indian B schools not able to attract the international talent? So I think that is something which is always going to be there. But yeah, so Indian MBA versus international MBA. So what about the two of you? Like, did you consider doing an MBA from India as well, or it was always Wharton or Harvard?
So in my case, I guess there were 2 reasons why I sort of looked at an international MBA, and I resonate to your answer about having that international cohort to sort of learn from. The way I looked at it, so the way I sort of learn and grow personally is by being around people and learning from them. So thankfully, because of Stephens, because of BCG, I got to be around a lot of really smart people, who like from India, got to learn from them. So one reason was that, hey, here, if I do decide to go to an Indian MBA college, I'll still continue to meet like, great, smart and amazing Indian people. But this is a group of people that I'm anyway sort of, amongst and learning from. So in case I do decide to, spend like that exorbitant amount on an MBA, I wanted to maximize the learning that I would sort of get from the cohort aspect of that. So that was one sort of guiding factor. And the second was a little more pragmatic. I was just aware of the GMAT exam a little bit more, and I just had a little bit more confidence as to, okay, given a shorter time frame, I can turn around the GMAT in a really good way, as opposed to probably the time and effort it may take to sort of convert a CAT. And in case I do decide to change my mind at some point because of the validity of the CAT exam, I may need to sort of get into it again and get into that whole cycle of giving exams. So that was also a pragmatic reason why I thought, I'll just give the GMAT, have that, on my plate, and then decide accordingly where I want to sort of take that, right? So that was sort of mostly the guiding reasons as to why I wanted to do an international MBA.
Fair.
I think for me it was again very similar. I think a change of scene and the kind of people that you're surrounded with at an international MBA is very different from an Indian MBA. Like IIMs, ISBs are great academic schools, but I really wanted to broaden my own perspective of looking at the world, of looking at how different business is done. And I think that global MBA provides that, because they actually make sure that they create a class which has a very diverse background, both in terms of career, both in terms of thinking, and in terms of what they want to do eventually.
Yeah.
I think that perspective gets developed much more in a global MBA. And for me also it was more about, I think, the credibility and the branding that you get, which I was talking about earlier, that I wouldn't do an MBA if it wasn't for Harvard Business School. And since that was the case, then I just decided that if it's an MBA, then it's just HBS for me. Otherwise, neither Indian nor global schools are going to cut it.
So let's take a hypothetical situation. If Wharton and Stanford would have admitted you, you wouldn't have gone there. Or you wouldn't have applied only.
No, I didn't. I applied to Stanford to hedge my risks because both Stanford, Wharton, all are amazing schools. I don't know what would I have done, but hand to heart, if I hadn't got into Harvard, I probably wouldn't have done an MBA.
Got it.
99% sure.
Got it. Fair. And let's talk about the reasons which you guys did MBA from. Like one which you all three mentioned right now is basically the global exposure, international exposure.
Yeah.
Second is diversity, where you get to meet a lot of new people from different countries, and they're always going to be there with you for the rest of your life. Third is Sarthak mentioning about the global brand, which is like Harvard, Stanford, or Wharton, which again you can carry for the rest of your life. Apart from these three, are there any other reasons that you thought कि हाँ इसकी वजह से अभी MBA करना चाहिए?
I mean, I want to take a page out of what he said, which was that for someone who's come from, and because that applies to me as well, what he said was that for someone who's come from a consulting or a math sort of background, the MBA is a good way to reset or like to potentially pivot. That,
Yeah.
A lot of people do it for the pivot reason, right? You pivot from career A into, well, it opens up a whole plethora of career options.
Yeah.
And similarly, I came from a startup background. I had an inkling that I'm probably going to go back to startups, but you never know, and you never know what you're going to find out while the 2 years of business school. The most randomest of conversation, the most randomest places can like suddenly spark a thought process that after which you could land up doing anything after that. And so yeah, one is, I think for me additionally as well was the fact that wait a minute, let's go back and reset from a clean slate. And you can actually, it is like a clean slate approach. And now you have the privilege or the advantage of several years of knowledge base before that. You've actually somewhat seen the world that you hadn't seen in undergrad, and so now you can make somewhat more informed choices, and you can actually
Right.
decide to go into anything after that.
Right.
And schools let you do that. People who didn't
Yeah.
come from PE background, they actually help you get into. Of course, it's harder than people who've come from PE, for instance, as a background. But they do. There are examples of people who've gotten into spaces that were otherwise would be practically impossible to get into cold turkey had you not gone through the P school path.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think that's one of the important aspects of why people do an MBA, because it's sort of a career reset. It's a pivoting moment. Like people sometimes are just done
Yeah.
with the industries that they have been in. They want to do something else, and it gives you those 2 years where you are relaxed, where you have ample time on your plate to think about what is it that you want in life. And as soon as you get into HBS, and I'm sure it happens in Stanford and Wharton also, like the day one is when they start asking you, what do you want to do in life?
Yeah.
What are you thinking about doing in the next 2 years that will help you do what you want to do eventually?
Oh, wow.
So that's like, it starts from day one.
correct.
And
Okay.
you think you reset what you have been doing till now in your life, and now you have to get into that mode of strategically thinking what is the next phase in your life that's going to come. And that's how the entire journey starts. So that is a big focus for all MBA schools.
Right. If you learned something new from this video, do share it with your friends and subscribe to this channel so that we can bring you the best content possible. Also, if you want to watch this entire episode, click on the link in the description box and you can go to Kushal Lodha YouTube channel and watch the entire podcast episode. Thank you so much for watching this and have an amazing day.